Thank you, Jane. So that was our first expert, and now I'm delighted to introduce Hannah Brown. So Hannah is a pdnet champion and an advisory teacher for physical disability, and Hannah has over 30 years experience in mainstream and special schools. So welcome, Hannah, and I'll put your first slide on.
Thanks, Sarah. So what we just wanted to do to start with is just a little bit of a slightly deeper delve into the statistics that Sarah gave you to start with. You know, they're obviously just a snapshot. They're from government figures based from June 21. But very roughly, we're looking at about one child in every 300 is classified, as categorised rather, as having a physical disability. However, if you look, again, this is something that Sarah alluded to at the beginning, if we look at those students who may have a physical disability as well as a condition, for example, like a medical need or PMLD, you know, we're looking at about 70,000. So as I said, we're looking at small numbers, but still very significant numbers. And just sort of as a personal aside, I've worked in Gloucestershire now for 17 years. I cover the two major urban conurbations, Cheltenham and Gloucester, and there's still some schools I've never been into. So as I said, I think it just sort of gives a little snapshot. As Sarah said, I'm a member of pdnet. Again, there'll be the link on the slides. We're an absolutely free to join organisation. It's supporting professionals and parents who are working with or living with a young person who has a physical disability. There's lots of free resources on the site. When we talk about physical disability, it's the same, you know, with visual impairment, with hearing impairment. There's a whole range of needs, a whole range of diagnoses. And one of the things on the pdnet website is there's a free level 1 training course. It's online. It will only take about 45 minutes. But again, that will introduce you to some of the categories, the main areas of need. There's also a whole variety of forums on there. So if you join as a member, excuse me, you can put a question up. Quite often, you know, we might have a question. I'm trying to think what the last one was about. I think it was about school trips, for example. So if you're looking to ask a question, you can put that question up on the pdnet forum, and you'll have access to, you know, I think we've got, you know, to all the people there who might be able to provide you with an answer. There's also some resources as well that there's a slight cost with. There's a level 2 training course, and also we've got some audit materials for school if you're wishing to run an accessibility audit. And again, as Sarah said, because we're dealing with low incidence, high need children, it's quite, you know, we can expect the fact, as I said, that, you know, school staff aren't necessarily going to have the knowledge and the skills there in order to, you know, to be able to support our learners. In some ways, the principles of supporting students, you know, as with all students, are very, very simple. If we think about our Maslow's hierarchy of need, we want all our students to be safe. And I think it's fair to say that students who've got physical disabilities and medical needs, their bodies are less safe. There are a lot more issues of concerning their safety than other students. So we really need to make sure we get the safety element right, then they'll be happy. And then they'll be then they'll be able to learn. So easy to say, but obviously, you know, not quite that simple. You know, it can be quite complex when we're thinking about how to support our learners. So if we could just go on to the next slide. Thank you. Again, you know, we just to sort of to set the scene a little bit as well. There are, you know, being a young person this day and age is tricky anyway. Let alone the fact, you know, we've got COVID that's chucked, you know, the great kind of hammer into everything as well. But looking at some data, and actually this was before the COVID, this is from 2018, we're seeing that about 30%, of our students with physical disability are going to have a mental health problem. We're thinking that, you know, quite often the children that we're working with are more likely to be living in poverty. The statistics are showing that there's 4 times more likely to be abused, 17% report being bullied at school, and about 3 times more likely to leave school with no qualifications, and twice as likely not to be in education, employment or training post 16. So what we need to do as educators, you know, the same with all our young people, is really make sure, you know, we're maximising the learning opportunities for our young people. So if you go on to the next slide, please. And again, this is just, some things I said you can sort of, read these for yourself. I don't need to read off the slides, just some things that some of the young people with physical disabilities are telling us. And again, it's not really rocket science, but it's just reminding us, they want to be included. I think, again, it was, the previous speaker was highlighting, the only successful solution is one that's going to work for the young person. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's really important we are listening to our young people. I always say that no one person has all the answers, but together, together we will get there. So that's why it's really important to work in a very collaborative way. So in my role, I'm working with a whole range of schools, a whole range of young people. And my advice for one young person with a particular diagnosis, is not going to be the same for another person with the same diagnosis in a different setting. As I said, it needs to be very, very individualised. However, having said that, obviously, we accept what young people said. If a young person says to me, Hannah, I don't want to do my homework, we don't accept that, but we will say, we'll think, what are the difficulties you're having with your homework? How can, we work through that as well? Could we go on to the next one, please? So, in summary, the young people we work with physical disabilities, they're saying, that they want to be safe. We've touched on that before. And quite often they don't want a fuss to be made. Again, I'm sure it's the same with, a lot of the young people you work with. They say, we just want to be the same, with those, air quotes, young people are looking for support, but they don't really want there to be a fuss. They don't want to be a faff. And again, referring back to what was said, previously, having a laptop, brilliant. But actually for that young person, it was too heavy. It wasn't appropriate. Our young people want to be included in everything. And that includes things like the activities that PTA have organised. They want to be included in sports days. They want to be included in school plays, school trips, going on residential trips as well. It's those sort of things which are just as important to all our young learners, as well as English and maths and everything else. Again, our young people want to be as independent as possible, and I think that's where when we a little bit later on we're sort of talking about using technology. It's what is independent. Independent doesn't mean doing everything on your own. It's about having the equipment and resources to be as independent and as autonomous as possible. And also they want things that work. Again, that's touched on by the previous speaker. And also the people that we're working with, they want staff that understand them and have the appropriate attitude to working with them. They want to, to be able to do things, not have things done for them. And equally well, they don't want to be having to explain themselves again and again. So we move on, please. So again, we've touched on this before, haven't we? That the young people we're working with, they want that kind of understanding. They want the understanding of the staff that they're working with. And also, so you sort of got a little breakdown there of all the different areas. So yes, a young person has a physical disability, maybe they have a medical diagnosis, but that will break down into component parts. But, we're also going to need to think about their friendships, their relationships, their social, emotional, mental health. Some of the young people I work with have life-limiting conditions. So whereas, their peers may be talking about jobs and getting married and moving out and, having their own homes, some of the young people I work with may not be living beyond 20 or 30. So obviously it's going to have quite an emotional impact upon their, it's going to have an emotional impact upon them. We need to think some of the young people I work with will have difficulties around speech and language and communication. And although some of the young people I work with physical disabilities, even though it's never just a physical disability, it may be that there's no underlying cognition and learning need, but actually it's around their access to education. And that's where the difficulty is. So quite often the young people we're working with going into a classroom, it's quite a daunting experience. And again, as professionals, we need to reduce those barriers. And what we want to do is provide our young people with appropriate support so that they feel empowered. So if we just look at, I'm kind of conscious of the time as well, if we look at a couple of examples here, a lot of the young people we're working with may have a physical disability that might impact upon their fine motor skills. So again, we might need to support them in terms of physically recording their work. We might want to use a bit of technology to help them with that as well. Sometimes we might, in terms of technology, we've got very much our low it's kind of a range, isn't it? It's from kind of very, very low tech to very, very high tech, and the high tech end just keeps expanding exponentially, sort of almost day by day. So if we just have a little look here, a couple of case studies, we've got two people here. We've got Sydney, we've got Andrew. So Sydney's got achondroplasia, so that's a genetic disorder, which means he's significantly shorter stature. So some of the support that's been put in place for him, he's got a rise and fall chair, which means that he's able to sit in school. Sorry, it means he's able to sit at the same height as his peers. There was some adaptations made in the toilet again, so he was able to physically access, the toilets in primary schools get a little bit bigger as you go, you move up through the years. So again, there was adaptations made to the toilet, so he could access those as well. There were steps put in for the classroom sink. There was a lower handrail on the school stairs. He had smaller cutlery. He had a lowered coat hook. And there was some adapted PE equipment for him. And he had a little tiny wireless mouse, which was just the perfect fit for his hand. And then we've got our friend Andrew, who had spastic quadriplegia. That means he's got very, very tight muscles impacting on all 4 of his limbs, and also has reduced speech. And so he had a little bit more sophisticated, a higher level of technology. So he had an adapted hygiene suite for him, which had hoisting facilities in. He's got a manual wheelchair. He's got a power wheelchair. He's got quite a high level of adult facilitation and assistance, but again, very much negotiated by him, very much giving him that level of autonomy. He's got a personalised curriculum, so they're able to incorporate all his physical therapeutic needs as well. And he's got a communication book, an iPad, and also a communication aid. Okay, to move on, please, Sarah. Thank you. Right, so this has very much been a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I think, as Sarah said, this is just sort of meant to be a little bit of a taster, isn't it, to working and supporting young children with very low incidence, low incidence needs of SEND. And as I've highlighted before, there's lots of additional training on the pdnet website. And finally, I want to leave you with the winning entry. Every year there's a national pdnet pupil voice competition, and this is the winning entry from last year, and the title was Reach for the Rainbow and Tell Us About Your Lockdown Story. And this is the winning entry submitted by Harrison, and it absolutely tells us about how assistive technology can enhance, enable and empower lives. So Harrison's 13, he's got Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and he found lockdown very difficult. He was, because of the nature of his conditions, he was one of the young people who was told that he had to shield, he had to isolate. So there was a lot of anxiety around him catching the virus, and he didn't want to leave the house at all. Staff in his area of Rochdale, they've got the Rochdale Additional Needs Service, continued to work with him throughout this time, and they were using Zoom as a way of interacting with him. And one of the daily sessions, it focused on some new technology which was provided for him by the Rochdale Communication Aids team. And he was provided with a Surface Pro that he could use via his keyboard, his touch screen, or his pen. So Harrison loves art, but he was finding this quite difficult due to his condition, because with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, the muscle functioning, the power, the quality and the range of movements is diminishing over time. But on Surface, there's a 3D paint program, which he was very keen to use. And each of the Zoom sessions provided by the Rochdale team focused on particular artists. And so he learnt how to use the 3D paint in order to produce a piece of work in the style of the particular artists. The sessions were a huge success, and he regularly produced really amazing pictures, which were then sent to his art teacher. So again, he was keeping those links up with school. And then after these sessions, he was then able to, when he returned to school, he was able to use these skills and knowledge in the school lessons. And another thing, because again, we're not just talking about school life, are we, that came out of the Zoom sessions, is he couldn't play on his Xbox anymore. So he wasn't able to keep in contact with his friends. Again, so the Rochdale team provided an Xbox adaptive controller and switches, gave him a few practice sessions over Zoom, and then again, he was able to master those skills and use them in a social situation. And then you know, with those skills as well, when his family were connecting via Zoom in lockdown, he sort of became the Zoom master. So he was able to, you know, help the connections with his family as well. And this was really important because the team from Rochdale were able to see over time, again, you know, using the Zoom sessions, enabling Harrison to use that assistive technology, you know, were really able to, you know, produce a positive change for his life. That's lovely. Thank you very much.